What are you trying to do around trust?
Well, everyone talks about trust, but not many people know what to do about it. I mean, that's the key thing. So what we've done is we've spent the last 18 months developing a methodology for defining and measuring trust. And we've got technology underneath that allows us to gather huge amounts of digital data from the internet. So that's mainstream news, certain aspects of social media, local news, trade press, blogs, websites, etc., etc. And we can then structure that data and determine how much a brand or a company is trusted.
What do you come up with? A actual score, or how does it work?
Well, we come up with what we call a net trust score. So we have a model that's based on 5 pillars. So basically the most fundamental is what we call proficiency, does something to do what it says it does on the tin. Allied to that, we've got what we call delivery consistency, which does something to do what it says it does on the tin repeatedly over time. On the other side of our model, we've got 2 pillars associated with values, essentially. So we have what we call integrity. Do the values you espouse as an organisation or a brand, are they congruent with the views of your stakeholders? And advocacy is really around whether you're perceived to be living those values, the values you espouse. Are you walking the walk? And then finally, we've got openness, which is around the way we communicate. Are you interactive with your stakeholders? Do you tailor your messaging? Do you take on feedback?
It's probably tricky to say. If you said of all those 5 things that make up trust, would you be able to say what you think is the most important, looking at it all, or is that tricky?
I wouldn't say important. I'd say fundamental. The most fundamental is basically proficiency, delivery proficiency, because unless you're delivering on your core promise as a company or brand, you've got no hope of really satisfying everything else. You can have the best intentions in the world, but if your product isn't very good or perceived not to measure up to what you bill it to be, then it's very difficult to be successful.
You've looked at the energy sector. How does it measure up?
It's quite interesting actually, because we've looked at the larger players in the energy sector, and we've compared them to, say, the UK banking sector, but also some sectors that are perhaps slightly more comparable, like the water sector. And it's quite interesting because what you find is, certainly at the sort of larger end of the market, the energy companies are quite competitive. So what you see is actually quite narrow differences, particularly between the big 6. You compare that to the water sector, and there's a very, very large variation between the sort of top player, which is it's fairly trusted. It's ahead probably of the average player in the energy sector. But there's also a lot of negativity, because again, what you see from the water sector is it comes through. It's not a competitive market. You don't have the choice really as a consumer where you buy your water from. With electricity, increasingly, and everyone's aware of that, people are chopping and changing all the time. And that comes through, and they're all looking at each other and they're competing. So what you see is, in terms of what we call the net trust score for the energy sector, you're looking around a sort of average of 24, plus 24. You compare that with banking. Banking comes in around about 18. So, and again, what drags that down, that's the average, what drags that down is certain players in the banking market are perceived very negatively. So they actually have negative trust. So from looking at the higher end, the sort of top end of the energy sector, it's actually relatively positive, so it's actually a good news story for the energy sector.
Isn't this just an exercise in, ego? What's it matter whether my trust score is good or bad? What's it going to do to my bottom line?
Well, that's a good question, and it's one of those questions that a lot of people have been wrestling for a long time. It's one of those things that people have been talking about since the financial crisis began, and crisis of trust. Why everyone intuitively knows it's important to be trusted, but it comes down to the most fundamental kind of knowledge that we have as people. Basically, the more trusted you are, the easier it is for you to do business. Quite simply because the way you trust someone or something, whether that's a brand, a company, or another person, that basically determines how you behave towards that entity in the future. And what we've done, and this is very exciting actually for us, is we've been able to take the way we measure trust, our methodology, the underlying technology. And as part of what we call the Embankment Project, which was a collaboration with 30 of the largest professional investors, multinationals, and we trialled our methodology and we did regression analysis against the financial performance of a sample of 20 of the FTSE 100 companies, and we were able to basically demonstrate a positive correlation between trust as we measure it in financial performance. Better still, trust appears to function as a lead indicator for future financial performance.
Whoa, hang on, say that again. So you're saying that if you can see how trustworthy a company is, you believe that that would be an indication of performance?
That's correct, yeah. Absolutely, because the way that...
That's a big statement to make, isn't it?
It is a big statement to make.
Because people just go, look at their revenue, look at their kind of losses, look at their investment portfolio. Why is the trust thing such a big determinant?
Well, when you look at revenues and when you look at financial data, that's taken over a period of time that's already occurred. That's retrospective. What we're doing is taking data in real time and looking at the fluctuations in trust over time, providing a net trust score, which we can do effectively minute by minute if that's required, and we can then work out what's going to have an impact on financial performance.